When we talk about warnings, the first instinct many people have is to think of them as punishments. Something harsh. Something imposed from the outside. But a warning is not punishment. It's an opportunity. It's a hand reaching out, saying, pay attention. You're heading toward a wall, and you still have time to change direction. That's what a warning really is. And the truth is, life has been warning us all along. The problem is, we don't listen. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you ignored the small signals until they turned into big problems? Your body whispers to you with fatigue, headaches, tension. You don't slow down. You don't rest. And then one day you're flat on your back with illness that forces you to stop. Or maybe in your relationships, you notice the distance, the silence, the lack of connection, but you brush it aside because you're busy, or you tell yourself it will fix itself. Then suddenly, the relationship shatters. The small signs were there all along. But we humans have a tendency we don't take warnings seriously until they become unavoidable. Now extend that to humanity as a whole. Look at our societies. Look at the earth. Look at the rising levels of anxiety, disconnection, and conflict in the world. Do you really believe these are random events? They are not. They are warnings. Warnings that something is out of alignment. Warnings that the way we live, the way we consume, the way we disconnect from ourselves and each other, it's unsustainable. But here's the key: warnings are not meant to paralyze you with fear. Fear blinds. Fear freezes. Warnings are meant to wake you up. They are meant to sharpen your vision, to make you see clearly. They say, it's not too late, but it will be if you continue to ignore this. This is where many people get it wrong. They hear the word final warning and immediately jump to the idea of doom, of catastrophe. But what if a final warning is not about destruction? What if it is about clarity? What if it's the ultimate chance life gives you to finally stop sleepwalking and to start living awake? That's the perspective shift I want you to consider. Psychologically, the human brain resists warnings because they force us to confront change. And change is uncomfortable. The ego doesn't want to admit it was wrong or that it needs to adjust course. But philosophically, isn't that the point of a warning? It breaks your illusions. It strips away the false sense of control. It forces you to see that the path you're on is leading nowhere, and it gives you the dignity of choice: continue in ignorance or wake up and realign. Think about this. If a parent warns a child not to touch fire, is it punishment? Of course not. It's love, it's protection. In the same way, what you might call God's warning is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to save you from destroying yourself. The question is, will you take it seriously, or will you keep waiting for one more chance? Because here's the reality: there comes a point where warnings stop, where the wall is no longer in the distance but right in front of you. And at that moment, you no longer have the luxury of choice. That is why ignoring small warnings is so dangerous. That is why we cannot afford to dismiss them as coincidence or noise or exaggeration. So the question I want to leave you with is this: are you awake enough to notice the warnings in your own life right now? Not later. Not someday. Now. Because if you can't listen to the small warnings, how will you ever recognize the final one? Remember this: a warning is not punishment. It is mercy disguised as urgency. One of the biggest illusions that keeps us asleep is the belief that we have time. That there's always tomorrow. That change can wait until after the weekend, or after the kids grow up, or after you finish this one project. But the truth is, this mindset is exactly what keeps most people stuck in cycles they never escape. They postpone the hard decisions, they delay the meaningful conversations, they put off the changes that could transform their life, and in doing so, they slowly drain the time they thought they had. We live like we're immortal. We schedule, we plan, we dream as if the future is guaranteed. But deep down, we all know the truth: it isn't. None of us are promised next week, let alone next year. And yet it takes something dramatic, a diagnosis, a loss, a crisis, for people to suddenly wake up and realize how fragile and temporary this life really is. Why do we wait for pain to remind us of urgency? Why do we need a shock to force us into presence? This is why I say a date like June 25th, 2025 is symbolic. It's not about superstition. It's not about predicting doom. It's about having a line in the sand that reminds you your time is not infinite. Your chance to realign, to choose differently, to live with more intention. That chance is now. Think of it like this: when you believe you have all the time in the world, you drift. You procrastinate. You keep living by habits that don't serve you because there's no pressure to change. But when time feels short, you get sharp. You get honest. You stop tolerating nonsense. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You focus. And that's the gift of urgency. Now, urgency is not panic. Panic is chaotic, reactive, and rooted in fear. Urgency is clarity. Urgency is presence. Urgency is the voice that says, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? It forces you to strip away excuses and confront the truth. Philosophically, time is not even something you can hold. It's not a possession. It's not a guarantee. The only real moment you ever have is this one, the present. Yet most people spend their present obsessing about the past or worrying about the future, all while ignoring the only place they can actually act now. That's the tragedy of how we live. We think life is happening later, but it's happening here. Right here. And so, when we speak of a final warning, it's not about counting down to some external event. It's about breaking free from the illusion of endless time. Because if you think you can always wait, you will never act. You'll die waiting. But if you realize your window is small, you'll start to live with a different intensity. You'll start to choose differently. You'll start to feel what it means to be awake. The shift is simple but profound. Stop asking, how much time do I have left? And start asking, what am I doing with the time I have right now? That question puts you in control. That question brings your attention back to the only place it belongs, this moment. So the challenge is this: don't postpone your awakening. Don't wait for the so-called right time. The right time is already here. If you want to change, if you want to live differently, if you want to honor the warnings life is giving you, start now. Not tomorrow, not June 25. Now, because the illusion of time is the greatest thief of life. And urgency, the right kind of urgency, is the key to taking it back. When you really stop and look at the way we live today, it's not hard to see why so many people feel restless, uninspired, even lost. We've built lives surrounded by walls, screens, and noise. And in doing so, we've cut ourselves off from the very thing that gave us life in the first place, nature. That disconnection is not just physical, it's spiritual. And when you disconnect from nature, you disconnect from yourself. Think about how often you actually feel the ground beneath your feet. Not pavement. The earth. When was the last time you stood still enough to hear the sound of wind moving through trees, or to notice how the sun feels when it hits your skin? These things sound simple, almost trivial, but they are not. They are reminders of the order we belong to, the rhythm of life that existed long before us and will exist long after us. The problem is that modern life pulls us away from that rhythm. We live by artificial clocks, not natural cycles. We wake when alarms tell us to, not when our bodies are ready. We eat food that's been processed and packaged so far from its natural state that it hardly resembles the earth it came from. We stare at blue screens late into the night and wonder why we can't sleep. And then we complain that we feel tired, disconnected, uninspired. But how could we not? You can't expect to live out of harmony with the natural order and still feel whole. And here's where it gets deeper. That disconnection isn't just about the environment. It's about the spiritual order we're meant to live in as human beings. Nature teaches balance. It teaches cycles. It teaches patience. When you observe it closely, you see that everything has its place and its time. Nothing in nature is wasted. Nothing rushes. Nothing forces. But we, as humans, force everything. We want growth without stillness. We want harvest without planting. We want strength without discipline. And so, we find ourselves exhausted, out of alignment, constantly chasing something we can't name. Philosophically, this disconnection explains so much of the emptiness people feel. When you're cut off from nature, you lose touch with humility. You forget that you are not the center of the universe, you are part of it. You forget that you are not separate from creation, you are creation. That humility is not weakness, it's freedom. Because the moment you remember that you're a part of something bigger, the pressure of control begins to lift. You don't need to force everything. You don't need to fight everything. You can allow life to flow in cycles, just as the seasons do. The danger of ignoring this truth is clear. When we disconnect from nature, we exploit it. When we disconnect from each other, we divide. And when we disconnect from spirit, we drift into confusion and fear. These are the warnings life is giving us right now. The rising imbalance in the environment, the rising imbalance in society, and the rising imbalance inside each one of us. They are not separate. They are reflections of the same disconnection. So, what does this mean for you personally? It means the first step to realignment is simple, though not always easy. You need to slow down and reconnect. Step outside without distraction. Breathe deeply. Notice. Touch the earth. Notice how it changes you. Notice how your thoughts quiet when you give yourself even a few minutes of silence in nature. That's not coincidence. That's your nervous system remembering what it was designed for. And here's the insight I want you to sit with. When you reconnect to nature, you reconnect to the truth. And when you reconnect to truth, you reconnect to yourself. So don't underestimate this. Don't dismiss it as soft or unnecessary. Your strength, your clarity, your creativity, even your ability to feel joy, all of it depends on your ability to realign with the natural and spiritual order you were born from. Because the farther you drift from nature, the more warnings you'll face. The closer you return to it, the more peace you'll find. And the choice, as always, is yours. There's another layer to these warnings, and it's one that most of us ignore every single day: the voice within. Call it intuition, call it your inner wisdom, call it the whisper of God. It doesn't matter what label you use. What matters is that it's there, and you know it's there. You've felt it. That tug in your gut when you're about to make a choice you know isn't right. That nudge in your chest when you're called towards something bigger, even if it scares you. That quiet voice that tells you to slow down, to pay attention, to stop pretending. And yet, what do? We override it. We silence it. We drown it out with noise, with business, with distractions, with the opinions of everyone else. We pretend we don't hear it because following it would mean facing discomfort. It would mean admitting that the path we're on isn't working. It would mean change. But here's the truth: ignoring that voice is one of the most dangerous choices you can make. Because that voice, your intuition, your inner compass, is not random. It's not just your imagination. It is the most direct guidance system you will ever have. It is how life, or God, or the deeper order of existence communicates with you. And if you consistently ignore it, you don't just lose touch with wisdom, you lose trust in yourself. Think about how many times in your life you've said, "I knew it." You knew the relationship wasn't right. You knew the job was draining you. You knew you shouldn't say yes, but you said it anyway. And later, when the consequences came, you shook your head and said, "I knew it." That's not hindsight. That's intuition you ignored. That's your inner wisdom trying to protect you, trying to guide you, but you chose not to listen. And why do we do this? Because the inner voice rarely tells us what's easy. It doesn't usually affirm the comfortable choice. It pushes us toward growth, toward honesty, toward authenticity. And that often means stepping into the unknown. It means facing fears, breaking patterns, leaving behind things, or even people that no longer serve who you're becoming. And that can feel terrifying. But here's what I want you to understand. The discomfort of listening to your intuition is nothing compared to the suffering of ignoring it. Ignoring it leads to regret, to disconnection, to a life that feels heavy and off course. Listening to it leads to alignment, even if the path feels uncertain at first. Philosophically, this is where the concept of God's warning becomes deeply personal. The world might show you warnings through external events, crises, disruptions, changes you didn't see coming. But there are also internal warnings, and they come through intuition. When you ignore those, the external warnings get louder. Because life will always try to wake you up, first gently, then forcefully, until you finally pay attention. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means you have to slow down enough to hear yourself. You can't expect to notice inner guidance if you never give yourself silence, if you're always scrolling, always rushing, always numbing. And when you do hear it, you have to trust it. That trust is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. The less you use it, the weaker it gets, until you convince yourself you don't even have intuition at all. But you do. Everyone does. The difference between a life that feels aligned and one that feels chaotic often comes down to this simple question: are you listening to yourself, or are you ignoring yourself? So let me leave you with this: your inner voice is not an inconvenience. It's not background noise. It's the map. And the longer you ignore it, the farther of course you drift. But the moment you choose to trust it, you return to the path that was always meant for you. The warning has already been given. The real question is, are you finally willing to listen? If we really want to understand why these warnings feel so urgent right now, we have to look honestly at what our culture has become obsessed with. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. Status, possessions, power, image, it's the endless chase for more. More money, more recognition, more control, more likes, more attention. And let's be honest, society praises this chase. We're told it's success. We're told it's ambition. But if you look deeper, if you strip away the shiny surface, you'll see that it's actually emptiness. Here's the paradox. People think that by filling their lives with more, they'll finally feel enough. But it never works. You buy the thing, you achieve the milestone, you get the title. And for a moment you feel good, you feel proud, maybe even powerful. But then it fades. The hunger returns. And suddenly, you're chasing again. This is not fulfillment. This is addiction. The warning here is subtle but clear. When you build your life on external validation, you lose connection to the internal foundation. And once that happens, it doesn't matter how much you achieve or accumulate. You're always at risk of collapse. Because nothing external can make up for what's missing inside. Think about it this way. If you put all your energy into polishing the outside of a house while ignoring the cracks in the foundation, it doesn't matter how beautiful it looks. Eventually, the whole thing comes down. That's exactly what's happening in our world right now. We've polished the surface, but we've neglected the structure. We've celebrated the pursuit of wealth and power while ignoring wisdom, compassion, and balance. And now the cracks are showing. This isn't just philosophical. It's practical. Look at the anxiety rates, the depression rates, the burnout epidemic. These are not random. They're the cost of a society that tells you your worth is measured by productivity, possessions, and performance. The more you chase those external markers, the more disconnected you become from yourself. And disconnection is always the beginning of collapse. The real power doesn't come from controlling others or collecting more. It comes from discipline, from alignment, from choosing integrity over image. Power is not how loudly you can shout. True power is the ability to stay centered when the world around you is chaotic. It's the ability to act with clarity instead of being pulled by fear or greed. That kind of power can't be bought. It has to be cultivated. This is why God's warning is not just about the big global crises we see out there. It's about the crisis happening inside each of us. Every time you choose material validation over inner truth, you widen the gap. Every time you prioritize appearance over authenticity, you deepen the cracks. And eventually, those choices add up. The collapse isn't sudden. It's built over years of ignoring the signs. But here's the hopeful part. Just like collapse is built over time, so is strength. Every small choice to align with values instead of ego is a repair to the foundation. Every moment you choose authenticity over image, you reinforce stability. Every time you pause the chase for more and instead ground yourself in gratitude for what is, you strengthen your core. The warning, then, is not here to shame or punish. It's here to redirect. It's telling us stop chasing illusions. Stop worshipping what doesn't last. Return to what is real, what is lasting, what can actually sustain you when the storms come. So let me leave you with this. The world may tell you that success is about having the most, but deep down, you already know the truth. Real success is about becoming whole. And that doesn't come from accumulation. It comes from alignment. The question you have to ask yourself is simple. Are you building your life on illusions, or are you strengthening the foundation that no storm can break? When you hear the words, final warning, it's easy to assume it means the end, that the door is about to close, that time has run out. But what if that isn't the real meaning at all? What if a final warning isn't about punishment, but about awakening? Think about it. A warning is never meant to destroy. It's meant to protect. It's meant to redirect. And if you really pay attention, a final warning isn't telling you that you're finished. It's telling you this is your last chance to choose differently. That's the power in this moment. The warning isn't just about global events, political turmoil, or environmental collapse. It's about your life. It's about your choices. Because here's the truth. The world doesn't transform through abstract ideas. It transforms through individuals, through you. Every shift you make inside yourself ripples outward. Every decision you make to live in alignment instead of distraction, to act in truth instead of fear, to love instead of withdraw. That's how change actually happens. The mistake most people make is waiting for someone else to fix things. We wait for governments, for leaders, for saviors. But the real warning is that no one is coming to do the work for you. The responsibility is personal. And that's not bad news. It's empowering news, because it means you're not powerless. You don't have to sit back and wait. You can begin right now. Think about the way you live your days, the small habits, the conversations, the priorities you set. Every one of those is a choice, and together they create the structure of your life. If you ignore the warning, those choices are guided by fear, ego, and distraction. But if you listen, those same choices can be guided by clarity, discipline, and presence. And the difference between those two paths is not small. It's everything. One leads to collapse, the other to strength. What's remarkable is how quickly things can shift when you decide. We tell ourselves change takes years, but often the hardest part isn't the process, it's the decision. The moment you say, enough, I won't live on autopilot anymore, you've already changed direction. The warning stops being something outside of you and becomes something you're actively responding to. This isn't about living in fear. Fear paralyzes. Fear makes people hide. But warnings aren't about hiding, they're about seeing clearly. They're about stepping out of denial and into courage. And courage doesn't mean you won't feel fear, it means you act anyway. So the real invitation here is simple: don't waste this chance. Don't dismiss the signs both in the world and in your own life. Listen, reflect, act. Because ignoring the warning doesn't just risk global consequences. It risks you missing out on the life you were actually meant to live. And maybe that's the deeper meaning behind all of this. God's warning isn't just about saving the world. It's about saving you from drifting away from who you truly are. It's about pulling you back before it's too late. Not because he wants to control you, but because he wants you awake, alive, and aligned with the truth. So here's what I want you to sit with. The final warning is not the end. It's the beginning if you choose it. The question is not whether the world will change. The world is always changing. The question is whether you will change with it or be left behind. The door is still open. The choice is still yours, but not forever. The warning is clear: wake up now. Because if not now, then when?